Gara has now awakened, where she no longer needs a stand stick. Rejoice! Trying to min-max different stand stick for the most damage. What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new Warframe video, coming at you with a reworked Gara. Alright, let's get right into it. As you know, Gara's first ability, Shattered Lash, was a pseudo-exalted, but now it's changed to be an exalted. So that means you can physically mod it right away, rather than depending on a stat stick. So let's take a look at the stats. As you can see, it has two ways of dealing damage, the puncture form and the slash form. If you quick tap, you will do the puncture thrust. If you hold cast, you will do this arcing swipe. And of course, you know which one's the better one. The arcing swipe, which has a wider coverage and it can proc slash to bleed enemies. So if you do not want to deal with the puncture thrust being the main way of activating this ability, go to options, all the way to invert tap hold abilities under gameplay. Click this, go to Gara and switch it to inverted. This will definitely make her feel so much better. Trust me. So now all you have to do is quick tap and you can do the arcing swipe attack. Now, because she has puncture and slash, depending on how you activate ability, you will only deal that damage type. That means even though she has two physical damage types, they are independent to one another. If I were to add any physical damage type, it will only add to that corresponding physical damage type. As you can see right there, slash, it only gives you slash. However, elemental damage will affect both forms. And because this is an exalted weapon, adding strength will increase its base damage. After adding some strength, you can see my base damage has increased to 976. This means the more strength you add, the more the IPS will increase. So now this does limit some arcane choices, as it's going to be a lot harder to utilize melee influence because of all the physical damage weighting that you're going to get. However, her other stats are quite good. Her crit chance went up from 0 to 20%, status from 0 to 30%, and the crit damage went from 1 times to 2 times. So she managed to get an overall buff. So now let's go over the 3 arcanes that are going to be her best bet. Yes, over melee influence, shockingly enough. Get it? Shockingly enough? Guys, did you get it? No? Okay. So the reason why melee influence doesn't work really well with Gara is because she has so much front-loaded damage that you're not able to apply the electric status effect for them to die to, for then the arcane to spread everything. As melee influence states, on melee electric status effect, you have a 20% chance for elemental status effects to apply to enemies. Now, because she has so much front-loaded physical damage and building up a lot of strength, it gives you a lot of damage overall per strike, you're not going to see too much of this unless you run lower strength. And at that point, why don't you just do a regular melee weapon that will do a better job than running Shattered Lash with melee influence? This is why Afflictions, Doughty, and Exposure are going to be her best bet. Having a look at Afflictions. Enemies affected by status effects gain 6 additional stacks when they're knocked down or flung by melee strikes. This is easily done by her arcing swipe, because not only does it fling enemies, but it can also bleed enemies. So you're going to get crazy amounts of damage over time, affecting them right at once. Showcasing here against some corrupted heavy gunners. So this allows you to just spam this attack against enemies, and they just go kabloomy. Just like that. So this is just the simple comfort pick. So now let's go over the other arcane that's going to be really good for Gara, and that's melee Doughty. As it states here, gain critical multiplier for every 10% puncture status chance on your melee weapon. To make this easier to understand, this implies if your weapon has the chance to proc puncture, you will gain critical damage. Going back to Shattered Lash, you can see she has 2 physical damage attributes, and Doughty requires puncture. Even though we're never going to use the puncture form, we're still able to benefit from the puncture. If we add melee Doughty, as you can see, we get a crit damage increase. Now, what happens if we add more puncture? Is that going to increase Doughty? No, it does not affect your crit damage. Because it's not about your puncture weight, but it's about your puncture proc rate. So, if you want to get more crit damage, you want to add more status chance. So, melee prowess will give you more crit damage. Elementalist will give you more crit damage. Weeping Wounds will give you more crit damage. These two will not immediately represent the amount of crit damage you're going to get because they are conditional mods. Now have a look at something else. Adding any form of additional status chance will increase your crit damage. So if I were to add Saxum, Thorax, this is impact, but we still get bonus crit damage. It's because it gives us more status chance. Carnus Mandible. It increases our slash damage, but it also increases our crit damage because it has status chance. So running Jargless Barbs, it affects the puncture version of the melee, but it also gives us crit damage as we gain more status chance. So if you're running melee Doughty, just add a bunch of status chance and you'll get more crit damage. And plus we're focusing more on getting additional crit damage and just slashing to bleed enemies. You don't have to worry about adding elemental damage, because adding elemental damage will affect your puncture proc rate, reducing the puncture proc frequency. And with melee exposure on ability casts, gain corrosive damage. This goes up to 240% corrosive damage. So for raw elemental damage build, just focus on raw damage. That's pretty much it. And for my Helminth abilities, I'll be running Roar as one of the 2 Helminth abilities. Roar is a universal damage multiplier that is also considered a faction damage multiplier. So it's going to multiply all of the damage that Gara deals, along with multiplying every damage over time instance that I deal. For the Archon Shards, I have 3 red Tau Forge. This will grant me 45% base strength, as you can see, and the 2 casting speed shards, because not letting animations shine is a huge tactical advantage. Now on the Gara build, as you can see, we have a Roar and Wrathful Advance setup. Those are the 2 helmets that I'll be running. Starting off with the Roar setup, Aegis and Augmented. Aegis is just some shield regeneration, and Augmented gives you 60% strength after 250 kills. Now in the aura, you have 2 options: Curse Rejection or Growing Power. If you want to run Steel Charge, you can, but this is going to be really nice just to increase your overall strength so you can get more damage. And then in the Exilus, we Foot Max. And the only strength increase that I'll be using is going to benefit my Roar more than my Shattered Lash. And that's with Precision Intensify. Because Molt Augmented, Growing Power is going to be my overall universal strength increases, and Precision Intensify is going to focus solely on buffing Roar. So then I can do more damage with my Shattered Lash. For range, I'll be running Archon Stretch. This is pretty much a stretch mon, but abilities that deal electric damage will restore energy over time. And then adding on to that range with Augur Reach. And the other reason why you add range here is because you won't need to modify your weapon with bonus range. You just put range on the Warframe. With these 2 range mods, you get 21 meters on your Shattered Lash, which is quite a large radius. And then the OP duo for additional energy management is going to be Prime Flow and Equilibrium. Large energy pool, energy and health orb conversion. For duration, just slapping on Prime Continuity. This gives me 46 seconds on Roar and 34 seconds on Splinter Storm. We unfortunately do not have the 4th ability, so we cannot refresh Splinter Storm. We'll just have to recast it. And now for survivability. You can play this however you want. You can add more shields and run adaptation. You can just run a shield regen setup, or you can run a catalyzing shield setup with rolling guard. So these 2 slots are there for your type of playstyle. If you're going to do the rolling guard setup with catalyzing shields, then you don't necessarily need Arcane Aegis and you can run anything else. But if you're going to be running Prime Redirection and Adaptation, that also works. Or you could be swapping Adaptation off for Fast Deflection for the shield recharge. It's up to you and how you like to play. So with the Roar build, let's take a look at the first Shattered Lash build. Melee Afflictions in the Arcane slot, base damage, crit chance per combo, crit chance and crit damage, status chance, more crit damage, electricity here, and melee elementalists. Now for those wondering, why would we run electricity here? It's just giving us more elemental damage, and because this is an exalted weapon, it's an ability but yet a weapon. So I can get Archon Stretch to trigger. And because this element is AoE and its damage over time, it's also going to benefit from Afflictions. Now for the second build, it's using the same mods. All I did was change the Helminth to Wrathful Advance. Wrathful Advance gives me flat crit chance for my melee weapons. So flat crit chance is applied after all of your built up crit modifiers. And if you don't have any crit modifiers, this becomes your base crit chance. And Wrathful Advance is going to pair really well with melee Doughty. As you can see, we have a decent amount of crit damage coming over here, and we have conditional crit damage. This also gives me crit chance. So, base damage, status chance, status chance, status chance. It really doesn't matter what you use here, but yes, more status chance, and Galvanized Elementalist for the status damage, and status chance when you kill enemies with your melee. And because we have so much crit damage, we needed to add more crit chance. That's why Wrathful Advance with 12 times crit damage. As you can see, it's starting to stack up already. And finally, we're going to get to 24.3 times crit damage. So yeah, the damage is quite substantial right here. And if you're not using Wrathful Advance on Kullervo and you just wanted to buff yourself, make sure to also change the invert tap hold abilities right there. Kullervo inverted. This affects Wrathful Advance even though it's a Helminth. So I just have to quick tap and it's going to be the hold cast version. You want to aim your Wrathful Advance away from the enemies so you get your crit chance buff. And with the same helmet, same loadout, let's take a look at the melee exposure build. Right here, again, we don't need to run Blood Rush or anything like that. Now, if you're going to run the Roar version instead of Wrathful Advance, change Spoiled Strike to Blood Rush. You'll be fine. As you can see, we have Viral Heat, melee exposure for the corrosive, base damage, crit damage, crit damage, crit damage. There you go. This is just upfront raw damage. This is just going to do one-shot types of damage. If you want, you can change the heat to electricity. That's up to you. But yeah, I missed those guys, but as you can see, the exposure build just doing so much damage right there. You guys may have noticed I was using a Hound instead of a Sentinel, and I'm not getting the benefits of Tenacious Bond. I'm using the Hound just for utility and instant spreading, while also giving me some crowd control. At the same time, the Hound is able to trigger Archon Stretch for me if I'm not using electricity on my weapons. And the build is pretty simple. Reaper Audit for the disarm, Guardian for the shield recharge, Synergized Prospectus just to trigger the electricity so I can get Archon Stretch. At the same time, Shattered Lash is a melee hit, so my Hound gets free Overguard. On top of that, I get bonus shields and Scent Deconstruct for the health orb drops, so I can convert that into energy thanks to Equilibrium. And its weapon is just a Bounty with viral, electric, radiation, and magnetic. It's nothing special, but it does the job. That's pretty much it. Out of the three loadouts, I personally prefer Afflictions because then I can run with Roar. I don't have to worry about casting Wrathful Advance every time. And Afflictions will scale pretty well by itself. But yeah, folks, this is Gara and the new Shattered Lash destroying everything in her path. I was trying to do a little rhyme there, don't mind that. But anyway, that has been it for me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more Warframe content, streams, so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.